My wife said you're toxic masculinity personified, so my revenge turned the label around and documented her own toxic exit for all to see. Toxic person in the room. My wife threw that label at me last Tuesday night. And honestly, it was the wake-up call I didn't know I needed. We were standing in our kitchen after dinner, and I'd made the apparently heinous mistake of asking why the dishes from breakfast were still sitting in the sink. Not yelling, not demanding, just asking. But according to her, that simple question made me the embodiment of everything wrong with men today. You're toxic masculinity personified, she said, crossing her arms like she'd just delivered some profound psychological diagnosis. Always demanding, always controlling, never appreciating what I do. The irony wasn't lost on me. This coming from someone who'd spent the last hour critiquing how I'd loaded the dishwasher, rearranged the spice rack I'd organized, and corrected the way I'd folded the towels. But sure, I'm the controlling one. I stood there for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. 3 years of marriage, and she'd developed this habit of weaponizing psychology terms whenever she didn't want to take responsibility for anything. Gaslighting, narcissism, toxic masculinity, her greatest hits playlist whenever we had any disagreement. Interesting perspective, I said calmly. So, asking about dishes that have been sitting here for 12 hours makes me toxic? It's not what you said, it's how you said it, she shot back, rolling her eyes. You have this tone, this expectation that I should just drop everything and cater to your needs. I looked around our kitchen. The breakfast dishes, the coffee mug with her lipstick still on the rim, the cereal bowl with milk residue hardening at the bottom. Then I looked at the clean dinner plates I had just finished washing and drying. What tone, exactly? Because I'm pretty sure I just asked a question there. Right there. That condescending voice you use when you think you're being logical. She threw her hands up dramatically. You can't just communicate normally, can you? Everything has to be some kind of power play with you. The funny thing about projection is how obvious it becomes once you start paying attention. Here she was, turning a simple question about household responsibilities into a full-scale psychological evaluation of my character. And I'm the one who can't communicate normally. I leaned against the counter, studying her face, the righteous indignation, the victim expression she'd perfected over the years. When had she become this person, or had she always been this way, and I was just too wrapped up in being a good husband to notice? You know what, I said, my voice steady. You're absolutely right. I do have expectations. Her eyebrows shot up, clearly not expecting agreement. I expect that if we both live here, we both contribute. I expect that conversations don't turn into character assassinations. And I expect that my wife doesn't diagnose me with personality disorders every time she doesn't want to do dishes. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. She pointed at me like she was identifying a criminal in a lineup. You twist everything around. Make me the bad guy when all I'm doing is expressing how your behavior affects me. The victim card. Right on schedule. I walked over to the sink and started washing her breakfast dishes myself. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to see how she'd react to being deprived of her grievance. What are you doing? She demanded. Dishes? I said without looking up. Apparently asking you to do them makes me toxic, so I'll just handle it myself. Don't you dare make me feel guilty about this. I turned off the water and faced her. I'm not making you feel anything. I'm just washing dishes. But it's interesting that you're feeling guilty about it. Her mouth opened and closed like she was trying to find the right comeback, the perfect psychological term to make me the villain again. But for the first time in months, I wasn't playing her game. You think you're so smart, she finally said, so emotionally evolved. But you're just as manipulative as every other man. You're just better at hiding it. I dried my hands slowly, taking my time. And what makes you the expert on manipulation? I can see right through you, the calm voice, the reasonable tone. It's all an act to make me look crazy. There it was. The admission hidden in the accusation. She could see through manipulation because she was fluent in it herself. I hung up the dish towel and looked at her directly. Has it ever occurred to you that maybe I'm calm because I don't have anything to hide? That maybe being reasonable isn't an act, it's just how adults handle disagreements? She stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head, searching for her next move, the tears, the silent treatment, the dramatic exit. Which weapon would she choose from her arsenal? Instead, she went with defiance. I'm not going to stand here and be lectured by someone who can't even see his own toxic patterns. Fair enough, I said, but I'm also not going to stand here and be diagnosed by someone who thinks asking about dirty dishes is a personality disorder. As she stormed out of the kitchen, I stayed where I was, looking at those clean dishes in the drying rack. Something had shifted in that conversation, but not in the way she'd intended. For the first time in our marriage, I hadn't apologized for being reasonable, and that apparently made me toxic. The next few days were educational, not in the way my wife intended, but educational nonetheless. She'd retreated into what I now recognized as her standard operating procedure after a confrontation, passive-aggressive silence mixed with strategic victimhood. Thursday morning, I made coffee for both of us like always. She took hers without a word but made sure to sigh heavily when she noticed I'd used her favorite mug. When I asked if she wanted me to switch mugs, she said, "It's fine," in that tone that clearly meant it wasn't fine. But she was being the bigger person by suffering through it. Friday evening, she ordered dinner for herself without asking what I wanted. When I pointed out that I was home and could have eaten too, she looked genuinely surprised. "Oh, I thought you were working late. You've been so distant lately." I hadn't been working late. I'd been home at my usual time every day that week. Saturday was when things got interesting. My buddy from college called while we were both in the living room. During our conversation, he asked how married life was treating me. I gave him the standard good can't complain response, but he pressed a little. "Really? Because you sound exhausted, man." I glanced at my wife, who was pretending to read but clearly listening to every word. "Just work stuff," I said. "All right, but if you ever need to talk..." He left it hanging, and I could hear genuine concern in his voice. After I hung up, my wife looked up from her book. "He sounds worried about you." "Yeah, he's a good friend. Must be nice to have someone who actually listens to your problems without judging you." There it was, the implication that I didn't have that at home, delivered with just the right amount of wounded innocence. "Is there something you want to say?" I asked directly. No, I just think it's sweet that you have that kind of friendship." She went back to her book, but I caught the little smile playing at the corners of her mouth. That's when it clicked. She was enjoying this, the tension, the subtle digs, the emotional chess game where she always got to be the victim and I always had to be the one trying to fix things. But what if I just didn't? Sunday morning, she made a production of cleaning the bathroom while I was reading the news. Lots of sighing, aggressive scrubbing sounds, and strategic door slamming. In the past, I would have asked what was wrong, offered to help, or at least acknowledged her martyrdom. Instead, I kept reading. The scrubbing got louder. I turned the page. Finally, she appeared in the doorway, rubber gloves still on, looking expectant. "The bathroom's clean," she announced. "Great," I said without looking up. "Thank you." She stood there for another moment, clearly waiting for something more, an apology, praise for doing basic household maintenance, recognition of her sacrifice. When none came, she huffed and walked away. That afternoon, I decided to test a theory. I started paying attention to patterns instead of just reacting to individual incidents. I grabbed a notebook and started writing things down, not to build a case against her, but to see if I was actually crazy, or if there really was something systematic happening here. Monday, asked if she wanted to watch a movie together. She said she was too tired, found her binge-watching a series by herself an hour later. Tuesday, she complained that I never plan dates anymore. I suggested dinner Friday. She said Friday wouldn't work because she might be tired from the week. Wednesday, she mentioned that couples should communicate more. When I asked about her day, she gave one-word answers and seemed annoyed by the questions. Thursday, she said I don't show enough interest in her hobbies. I asked about the yoga class she'd been attending. She accused me of checking up on her. Friday, dinner didn't happen because she forgot. We discussed it and made other plans. The pattern was becoming clear. Every interaction was designed to put me in a no-win situation. Show interest and I'm controlling. Don't show interest and I'm neglectful. Make plans and I'm presumptuous. Don't make plans and I'm lazy. But the real revelation came Saturday morning when my neighbor stopped by to borrow a ladder. My wife was instantly charming, laughing at his jokes, asking about his family, being the picture of a delightful suburban wife. The moment he left, the mask dropped. "I can't believe he just showed up without calling," she said, rolling her eyes. "Some people have no boundaries." I'd watched her be genuinely warm and engaging for 20 minutes. The switch was so immediate, so complete, that it actually made me dizzy. "He seemed nice enough," I said carefully. "Oh, please. He's one of those guys who thinks being friendly means he can just impose on people whenever he wants. Typical entitled behavior." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. When had my wife become someone who could perform warmth and then immediately tear apart the person she'd just charmed? That evening, I called my college buddy back. "Hey, remember what you said Thursday about me sounding exhausted?" Yeah, man, what's going on? I found myself explaining the pattern I'd been documenting, trying to keep emotion out of it, just presenting facts. When I finished, there was a long silence. Dude, he said finally, that's not normal. What do you mean? I mean, healthy people don't set up tests where you can't win. That's psychological manipulation 101. Maybe I'm just being too sensitive. Are you kidding me? You asked about dirty dishes and got called toxic. You tried to plan a date and got accused of not planning dates. Come on. After we hung up, I sat in my car in the driveway for a while, thinking. My wife had spent years convincing me that my perceptions were wrong, that my reactions were unreasonable, that my expectations were too high. But what if they weren't? What if the person calling me toxic was actually the toxic one? I walked back into the house with a different perspective. She was in the kitchen, and when she saw me, she immediately launched into a complaint about how I'd left my coffee mug on the counter instead of putting it in the dishwasher. You're right, I said calmly. I should have put it away. She blinked, clearly thrown off by the lack of defensiveness. Oh, well, good. I'm glad you can admit when you're wrong. I picked up the mug and put it in the dishwasher. Absolutely. Just like I'm sure you'll admit when you're wrong about things, too. The look on her face was priceless, like I'd just suggested something completely foreign. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing specific, just that we all make mistakes, right? We all have things to work on. She studied my face, trying to figure out if this was some kind of trap. Right, she said slowly. Of course. But I could see her mind working, trying to figure out what had changed, why I wasn't playing by the old rules anymore. Good. It was about time she had to figure something out for once. By Wednesday, I had enough material to write a psychology textbook. My little notebook had turned into a comprehensive catalog of manipulation techniques. And honestly, I was impressed by the variety. My wife wasn't just toxic, she was creative about it. The beauty of documentation is that patterns become undeniable. What felt like isolated incidents suddenly revealed themselves as a coordinated campaign. Every guilt trip, every emotional reversal, every victim performance, it was all part of a system designed to keep me off balance and apologetic. Time to return the favor. I spent my lunch break researching the very terms she loved throwing around. Gaslighting, emotional manipulation, projection, victim playing. Turns out there's quite a bit of academic literature on these subjects, and the more I read, the more I realized she was practically a case study. Thursday evening, she started her usual routine. I'd gotten home 5 minutes later than normal due to traffic, and she was standing in the kitchen with her arms crossed. Nice of you to show up, she said. In the past, I would have apologized and explained about the traffic. Instead, I just nodded. Traffic was heavy today, I said matter-of-factly. She waited for more. The apology, the guilt, the desperate attempt to make her feel better about my 5-minute delay. When none came, she escalated. I was starting to think you'd forgotten you had a wife. Nope, I said, opening the refrigerator. Still married, still live here, just 5 minutes later than usual due to circumstances beyond my control. Her face went through several expressions before settling on wounded confusion. You don't have to be sarcastic about it. I wasn't being sarcastic. I was being factual. I pulled out ingredients for dinner. Would you like me to cook tonight, or did you have other plans? The question clearly threw her. It was direct, practical, and didn't acknowledge her emotional manipulation at all. I don't know, I hadn't thought about it. No problem. I'll handle it. As I started cooking, I could feel her watching me, trying to figure out what was different. The old me would have spent 20 minutes reassuring her that I hadn't forgotten about her, that I valued her feelings, that I was sorry for making her worry. The new me was making pasta. Friday was when I decided to test something more ambitious. She'd been building up to one of her signature emotional explosions. All week, I could see the signs, the little comments, the strategic silences, the gradual escalation toward some dramatic confrontation where I'd end up apologizing for existing. But what if I interrupted that pattern? She started Friday evening's performance right on schedule. We need to talk, she announced as I walked in the door. Perfect. I set down my keys and gave her my full attention. Absolutely. What's on your mind? She launched into a prepared speech about how I'd been emotionally distant lately, how my attitude was affecting our relationship, how she felt like she was walking on eggshells around me. I listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, maintaining eye contact. When she finished, I waited a moment before responding. Those are some serious concerns, I said. I appreciate you bringing them to my attention. She blinked. You do? Of course. If my behavior is causing problems, we should definitely address it. I pulled out my phone. Mind if I take some notes? I want to make sure I understand everything correctly. Notes? Well, if we're going to work on these issues, I should probably document them properly. That way, we can track progress over time. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. So, let's see, I continued, opening a note app. You said I've been emotionally distant. Can you give me some specific examples? Dates, times, particular incidents. What? Specific examples? If I'm going to change problematic behavior, I need to understand exactly what I'm doing wrong. When was I emotionally distant? What did that look like? She stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. It's not about specific times. It's more of a general feeling, okay? But feelings usually have triggers, right? Specific actions or words that cause specific reactions. I looked up from my phone. I'm just trying to understand the data here, the information about my behavior that's causing these problems. If we're going to have a productive conversation about fixing our relationship, we should probably be specific about what needs fixing. The look on her face was fascinating. She'd come in expecting an emotional firefight, and instead she was getting a clinical analysis. You're being weird, she said finally. How so? This whole note-taking thing, the questions, it's not normal. I looked at my phone, then back at her. You said we needed to talk about problems in our relationship. I'm trying to understand those problems so we can solve them. How is that not normal? Because, she struggled for words. Because you're treating this like some kind of business meeting. Would you prefer I treat it emotionally? Get defensive? Maybe raise my voice? Turn it into an argument? No, I just want you to... To what? The silence stretched between us. I could practically see her brain short-circuiting as she realized what she actually wanted. For me to automatically accept blame without asking for evidence. I want you to care, she said finally. I do care. That's why I'm taking notes. That's why I'm asking for specific examples. If you're unhappy, I want to understand why so we can fix it. But you're not. You're not. Not what? Another long pause. Apologizing, she whispered. And there it was. The real issue. Not my behavior. Not our relationship problems. Not any actual concerns about our marriage. She wanted an apology without having to prove I'd done anything wrong. Should I apologize before I understand what I did wrong? I asked gently. That's not what I meant. Then help me understand what you did mean. She stood there for a full minute, opening and closing her mouth, clearly frustrated that her usual script wasn't working. Finally, she threw her hands up. You know what? Forget it. Just forget the whole thing. She started to storm out, but I stopped her. Wait, don't you want to work on these relationship issues you mentioned? She turned back, and for a split second, I saw something dangerous flash across her face. Pure anger, quickly covered by her usual victim expression. Obviously, you don't think they're real problems. I never said that. I asked for specific examples so we could address them properly. If you have to ask for examples, then you're not paying attention to your own behavior. I nodded thoughtfully. So, you're saying I should just know what I'm doing wrong without you having to explain it. I'm saying a good husband would notice when his wife is unhappy. I did notice. That's why we're having this conversation. Another moment of silence while she tried to find her footing. This is exactly what I'm talking about, she said finally. This coldness, this analytical attitude. Where's the emotion? Where's the passion? I looked at her carefully. Are you saying you want me to be more emotional during conflicts? I want you to care enough to fight for this relationship by getting upset instead of trying to solve problems, rationally. By showing that this matters to you. I closed my phone and looked at her directly. Our relationship matters to me. That's why I want to fix actual problems instead of just arguing about feelings. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact instant she realized her strategy wasn't working anymore. You've changed, she said quietly. How so? You used to try harder. To do what? To make me happy. I nodded slowly. And how's that been working out for us? Saturday morning arrived with the subtlety of a nuclear bomb. My wife had clearly spent Friday night preparing her counterattack because she came into the kitchen where I was having coffee with the energy of someone who'd found her smoking gun. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," she announced, positioning herself directly across from me. "And I realized what's really happening here." She crossed her arms, clearly proud of whatever revelation she'd reached. "You're stonewalling me." I took a sip of coffee. "Stonewalling?" "Yes, it's a classic manipulation technique. Emotional withdrawal designed to punish your partner." She said it like she was diagnosing a medical condition. I looked it up. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. After years of weaponizing psychology terms against me, she'd spent the night researching new ammunition. "Interesting theory," I said. "What makes you think that?" "The note-taking, the cold responses, the refusal to engage emotionally. You're trying to make me feel crazy for having feelings." I set down my coffee cup and really looked at her. She was practically vibrating with righteous energy, convinced she'd cracked the code. "Can I share something with you?" I asked. "What?" I stood up and walked to the kitchen drawer where I'd been keeping my notebook. Her eyes followed me nervously. "Since you're interested in psychology terms and behavior patterns, I thought you might find this educational." I opened the notebook to the first page. "Monday, October 2nd, asked if you wanted to watch a movie together. You said you were too tired. Found you watching TV alone an hour later. Tuesday, October 3rd, you complained I never plan dates anymore. I suggested dinner Friday. You said Friday wouldn't work because you might be tired. Wednesday, October 4th, you said couples should communicate more. When I asked about your day, you gave one-word answers and seemed annoyed by the questions. Thursday, October 5th, you said I don't show enough interest in your hobbies. I asked about your yoga class. You accused me of checking up on you. Friday, October 6th, dinner didn't happen because you forgot. We discussed it and made other plans." Her face started changing colors. I flipped the page. Should I continue? Because I have 3 weeks worth of this material. You've been spying on me. I've been documenting our interactions. You know, the same way therapists recommend when someone thinks they might be experiencing gaslighting. The word hit her like a physical blow. She actually took a step backward. "I'm not gaslighting you." "Really?" "Let's see." I flipped to another page. "Last Tuesday, you said I never help with housework. Wednesday morning, you criticized how I loaded the dishwasher, rearranged the spice rack I'd organized, and redid the towels I'd folded. Thursday, you complained that I never do laundry. Friday, you rewashed the clothes I'd already washed because they didn't smell right. Those are just what? Just you moving the goalposts every time I try to meet your standards?" I sat back down but kept the notebook open. "Here's my personal favorite. 3 weeks ago, you said I don't communicate my feelings enough. 2 weeks ago, when I told you I was frustrated about the constant criticism, you said I was being too sensitive. Last week, when I tried to discuss our relationship calmly, you accused me of being emotionally cold." She was gripping the back of a chair now, her knuckles white. "You're twisting everything." "Am I? Let me read you something else." I found the right page. Direct quotes, by the way. "You never listen to me," said immediately after interrupting me 3 times in 5 minutes. "You always have to be right," said after I agreed with you. "You make everything about yourself," said during a conversation where you talked for 20 minutes straight without asking me a single question. "Stop. Oh, we're just getting started. Because you mentioned stonewalling, and I thought you might want to know what that actually looks like." I flipped to the back of the notebook. Silent treatment episodes. October 1st through 3rd, after I asked why the dishes were dirty. October 8th through 10th, after I suggested we budget for vacation instead of just talking about it. October 15th through 17th, after I didn't immediately agree that your sister was being unreasonable. Each lasting approximately 3 days. Each ending only when I apologized for something I didn't actually do wrong. "This is insane," she whispered. "Is it? Because, according to the research I did, the same research you did last night, stonewalling is exactly what you just described. Emotional withdrawal designed to punish your partner." I looked up at her. "Sound familiar?" She was shaking now, and I could see her mind racing, trying to find some way to turn this around. "You're sick," she said finally, keeping notes like some kind of stalker, documenting every conversation. She came back 3 hours later with reinforcements. Not her mother or sister like I expected, but her best friend, who'd apparently been recruited as a witness to my abusive behavior. I was reading on the couch when they walked in without knocking. "We need to talk," she announced, positioning her friend like a bodyguard. I looked up calmly. "About what?" About your little notebook and your sick obsession with documenting private conversations. Her friend nodded supportively, clearly having received the victim version of events. I told her everything, my wife continued. How you've been stalking my every move. Keeping records like some kind of psychopath. I closed my book and looked at her friend. Did she mention why I started keeping records? That's not the point, my wife snapped. The point is that normal people don't spy on their spouses. Normal people also don't need to document conversations to remember them accurately. Her friend finally spoke up. This does seem kind of controlling. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, returning with my phone. Let me show you controlling. I opened my banking app and turned the screen toward them. Joint account, right? Want to see what controlling actually looks like? I scrolled through the recent transactions. Spa day, shopping trip, lunch with friends, another shopping trip, expensive skincare products, more lunches out. $1,200 in 3 weeks on what exactly? My wife's face went red. I'm allowed to spend money. Absolutely. From your own account. This is joint money for joint expenses. I switched to another screen. Want to see my spending from the same period? Groceries, gas, utilities, mortgage payment. Her friend was looking uncomfortable now, clearly realizing she'd walked into something more complicated than advertised. See, controlling would be me monitoring every purchase, questioning every expense, making you ask permission to spend money. I looked directly at my wife. What I'm doing is called setting boundaries. You can't just cut me off from our money. Our money? When was the last time you contributed to this account? The silence was answer enough. I thought so. Well, here's how boundaries work. Starting Monday, you get access to exactly what you contribute. Nothing more, nothing less. I walked over to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a credit card, cutting it in half right in front of them. That was the joint card. If you want spending money, you can earn it. Her friend was backing toward the door. Maybe I should go. No. My wife grabbed her arm. Stay. I want you to see what I'm dealing with. But her friend had seen enough. This feels like a private conversation. Call me later. After she left, my wife turned on me with pure fury. How dare you humiliate me like that? I didn't humiliate you. I demonstrated the difference between partnership and dependency. I'm your wife, and I'm your husband, not your ATM. She tried tears next. I can't believe you're being this cruel over money. This isn't about money. This is about respect. You spent 3 years treating me like an enemy while spending my income like an allowance. Our income. Show me the pay stub that makes it our income. She couldn't, because there wasn't one. She'd quit her job 2 years ago to focus on herself, and had been living off my salary ever since. Marriage is supposed to be a partnership, she said, switching tactics again. Exactly. Partners contribute. Partners respect each other. Partners don't manipulate and gaslight each other for years. So, you're just going to financially abuse me now? I almost laughed. Financial abuse would be preventing you from working or controlling money you earned. What I'm doing is called employment motivation. She stormed upstairs, and I could hear her on the phone, probably calling everyone she knew to paint me as the villain. 20 minutes later, she came back down with her laptop. Fine, I'll get a job, but when I do, I'm keeping my own account, and you can pay for everything yourself. Sounds fair. She blinked, clearly not expecting agreement. And I want half of everything when we divorce. Also sounds fair. You can have half of everything you contributed to. Her mouth fell open. That's not how divorce works. Actually, in a no-fault state with documented financial irresponsibility and emotional abuse, it's exactly how divorce works. I pulled out my phone again. Remember that notebook you hate so much? Turns out detailed documentation of manipulative behavior is pretty valuable in legal proceedings. The color drained from her face. You're bluffing. M the first. You want to test that theory? For the first time in our entire marriage, she had no comeback, no psychological diagnosis, no victim performance, no manipulation technique that could navigate around simple consequences. She was finally experiencing what accountability felt like, and she clearly hated every second of it. Monday morning came with the sound of suitcases being dragged across hardwood floors. I was making coffee when she appeared in the kitchen, fully dressed with her bags by the door. I'm leaving, she announced dramatically. I looked at the suitcases, then at her expectant face. Okay. She waited for more, the panic, the pleading, the desperate attempt to make her stay. Instead, I took another sip of coffee. That's it. Just okay. What would you like me to say? I'm walking out of our marriage, and you don't even care. I set down my mug and looked at her directly. You've been emotionally checked out of this marriage for years now. You're just making it official. I thought this would make you realize. Realize what? That I should beg you to stay so you can continue treating me like garbage? Her face crumpled into the victim expression she'd perfected. I don't treat you like garbage. 3 years of documentation says otherwise. She tried a different approach, moving closer with softer eyes. We could work on things. Go to counseling. I could try harder. Try harder to do what? Respect me. Contribute to our household. Treat me like a partner instead of an ATM. Yes. All of that. Why should I believe you? The question clearly caught her off guard. Because I'm your wife. That's not an answer. That's just a title. Give me one reason why anything would be different. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Nothing came out. I didn't think so. I walked over to the closet and pulled out 2 more suitcases. What are you doing? Helping you pack. If you're leaving, you should take everything. I don't need help. Sure you do. You've missed some things. I started gathering her belongings methodically, expensive skincare products from the bathroom, designer clothes from the bedroom, the jewelry I'd bought her for various anniversaries. Stop. You're being ridiculous. I'm being thorough. When you leave, I don't want any excuses to come back for forgotten items. The reality of the situation was finally hitting her. This wasn't going according to her script at all. You can't just throw me out. I'm not throwing you out. You said you were leaving. I'm helping you leave completely. I packed her laptop, her books, even the decorative pillows she'd insisted on buying. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. You're my husband. You're supposed to care what happens to me. I stopped packing and looked at her. When was the last time you cared what happened to me? When was the last time you asked about my day without turning it into a complaint about your own? When was the last time you showed any interest in my feelings that wasn't just ammunition for your next argument? She had no answer. That's what I thought. I continued packing while she stood there, clearly realizing that her dramatic exit wasn't having the intended effect. This is insane, she said quietly. You're supposed to fight for us. I did fight for us, for 3 years. I fought by apologizing for things I didn't do, by accepting blame for your behavior, by trying to make you happy no matter what it cost me. I zipped up the last suitcase. But I'm done fighting battles that were rigged from the start. So that's it. You're just giving up. I'm not giving up. I'm choosing self-respect over dysfunction. I carried her bags to the door and set them outside. You can't do this. I'm not doing anything. You decided to leave, remember? I'm just making sure you don't change your mind halfway out the door. She looked around the house desperately, as if seeing it for the first time. This is my home too. Was. Past tense. You'll regret this. You'll realize what you lost and come crawling back. I almost smiled. Even at the end, she couldn't resist one final manipulation attempt. You know what I realized? I didn't lose anything. I'm finally stopping the hemorrhaging. What's that supposed to mean? It means you were a net loss from day one. Financially, emotionally, psychologically. You took more than you gave, criticized more than you appreciated, and demanded more than you contributed. I opened the front door. But hey, I'm sure you'll find some other guy who's willing to fund your lifestyle while you treat him like an inconvenience. She grabbed her purse, tears streaming down her face now, but I could see the anger behind them. You're going to be miserable without me. Maybe. But I'd rather be miserable alone than miserable with someone who makes it worse. As she dragged her suitcases toward her car, she turned back one last time. I hope you're happy. I watched her load her bags, start the engine, and back out of the driveway. When her taillights disappeared around the corner, I closed the door and walked back to the kitchen. My coffee was still warm. For the first time in years, I sat in complete silence. No criticism, no complaints, no psychological warfare disguised as conversation. Just peace. And you know what? I was happy. Genuinely, surprisingly, completely happy. Because sometimes the best thing that can happen to your life is someone toxic finally removing themselves from it.